Hello, Stripe developers. We are here with Mark Doyle, who is an engineer on the Dev Productivity for AI team here at Stripe, and who will be giving a talk tonight at our Dublin meetup. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Anna. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Looking forward.
So glad you're here. So we'll be talking about the topic of your meetup talk, but also a super popular blog post on stripe.dev, which is all about minions. So first of all, what are minions?
Yeah, it was great. We saw the blog post on the developer site was so popular, and we definitely heard all the feedback. It was really great to see. Minions are Stripe's one-shot coding agents. So these are coding agents we developed internally in Stripe for executing coding tasks in literally one go. So from a prompt in Slack or another surface in Stripe, Stripe engineers can start a coding agent that has a goal of accomplishing some task, and it runs autonomously from the developer kicking it off all the way to a pull request which passes CI and is ready to be reviewed by a developer. So really taking the developer a little bit away from monitoring coding agents in the CLI, for example, and like dedicating a lot of attention to them, to being able to let the agent go and run and try and achieve a goal, and then reviewing the outputs and then iterating from there.
I'm more familiar with using agents the traditional way, I guess, which is like using Claude in VS Code or Cursor or something like that. So tell me, what is a one-shot agent? I'm not super familiar with that concept.
Yeah, sure. I guess the traditional way, or traditional as of the last 12 months, feels like a lot longer than that.
Right.
But I suppose the traditional way is for tasks where are maybe a little bit more ambiguous, or the developer wants to iterate with the agent while it's actively working on them. So to be a little bit more in the loop in a kind of co-pilot style environment. One-shot agents are agents where we aim to sort of pull that part of the task out of the developer sitting with the copilot and pull that section of the task more, shift it left more to the front of the agent run. So before the coding agent even starts, we want the agent to be given enough context to accomplish this task in like one shot. So if your conversation maybe could have been the conversation you had with the agent that provides the context could have been more upfront and ahead of the agent starting. We want our engineers to do that, so then the agent can go and just implement the change. They don't need to babysit the agent the whole way along and be sitting there waiting for it to ask for more context. We'd like to give it to it upfront and then let the engineer take their hands off the keyboard.
Okay, so this is specifically also for probably more narrowly scoped tasks, or like, smaller tasks, not like a big plan or architecture changes or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. One-shot agents are definitely exceptional for like very small, simple changes that engineers want to do. It's literally just like changing a line. We can, or say creating a feature flag. We don't need engineers to spend like 20 minutes creating branches, pull requests, etc. But also, minions are very capable of larger feature changes that are like well scoped out by the engineer in advance and then handed off to them. But yeah, broadly for more iterative architecture changes, we turn towards the traditional CLIs and things like Cursor, and then one-shot agents will be for the other style of task.
Cool. Bug fixes on call, I'm guessing. On call, folks really love them.
Cool. Yeah, exactly. Just lots of issues coming in and being triaged. We can even autonomously start the minions to resolve some of the issues, and the developer can just review the outputs without even having to think about how they might have started them. Awesome.
I wish I had that back when I was on call. So Minions even now has its own web UI, which that's really cool. I mean, I feel like they're getting more and more productized, which is really neat for an internal tool. So can we maybe see what these agents or what these minions look like in the UI?
Yeah, sure, Anna. Minions began their life at Stripe as something that was triggered only from Slack. So developers would be having a conversation and then say, "Hey, minion, please, implement what we discussed in this conversation." But now we even have minions that are available to us in the web browser. So you can see here in my web browser, this is the minions user interface, and it's quite a developer-friendly interface. So you can see here we have this like small button to open and close the sidebar, which has keyboard shortcut to toggle the sidebar with Command B. For example here, we might want to add another keyboard shortcut to this interface for the new agent button here. I noticed this doesn't have one. Maybe we should assign something like Command Shift N to this button. So I'm going to kick off a minion to implement this.
Cool. Yeah.
So first,
Case.
yeah, I'm not actually sure where in the code base this change will be made. So I'm just going to ask an agent first before we kick off the one shot, just to gather some context up front.
Okay. Cool. And this like has a probably well-defined pattern already because there's other shortcuts, right? So it should be something that the agent can look at and see an example.
Exactly, yeah. So we can see here the agent is researching our code base. We gave it this prompt of how can we add a keyboard shortcut to the new agent button. And now the agent is researching the code base and using some tools to understand where this code might be located. We can see it's resolved this here, like specifically where in the code base to look. And now, yeah, it's researching how it's going to suggest to implement this task.
Nice, and it's using other internal tooling as well.
Exactly, yeah. So we use source graph, for example, as a code index to allow our agent to search very quickly across the code base. The Stripe code base is like on the order of 275 million lines of code. So running ripgrep, or not even grep, but ripgrep, the faster version of grep in the code base can take like 2 or 3 minutes to complete a search. And you can see here our agent has, I think, implemented or made dozens of search tool calls, and we've probably been watching for 30 seconds or something here. And yeah, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here, we have this context panel where we can see what kind of thing the agent is referencing. So if I look here, looks like it can just be a one-line change.
Oh, easy.
Yeah,
Nice.
exactly. So we already have some kind of shortcut here. And all we need to do is add this line. So already, without gathering too much context, I'm pretty confident that this is something we can just one-shot. It's not a bug or not a feature in the critical path. So
Right.
we're very happy to offload this, and then we have like an extensive battery of tests and other tooling to investigate, or to potentially catch any mistakes the minion might make. And of course, after the minion is spun up, it will provide us with an environment to validate the UI change ourselves.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah,
So it is able to deploy a preview deployment.
exactly.
that?
Yeah.
Okay, that is really cool. That is something I wish I also had.
Yeah, so once we click here to hand off this plan to a minion,
Okay.
we're just going to say to the minion, implement the plan discussed in this chat.
Nice.
And we can click hand off. So once this happens, we're going to first give the minion some compute, or like a laptop of its own to work on. So we call these dev boxes, which are like remote developer environments at Stripe. So we can see here the dev box is being spun up, and the minion is going to be given a place to live and a file system to make changes on.
Cool.
So yeah, once that has completed, the minion will begin implementing the plan as we discussed here, and we can now turn our attention back to other tasks until the pull request is ready for review.
Very cool. So, and then it'll make a pull request, and presumably a human will still review it before
Of course,
it gets
yeah.
merged in. And who's doing the merging?
Yeah, so in this case, the first step will be for the engineer who triggered the minion, so me, and a review agent to review the outputs of the minion. So we definitely don't want to, at Stripe, to create changes with code changes with AI, especially ones that we didn't supervise directly, and just throw them straight to another Stripe engineer for review.
Yeah.
So first, an agent will have a look at it and then pass it back to me to look for any issues, etc. And I will probably test the change myself, open the preview version of this UI, which we're changing, make sure the button works, and read the code myself to make sure it's a sensible change. And then at that point, it just becomes like another regular pull request where we can hand this off to another Stripe engineer for review.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So we have these, we have at the order of like thousands of PRs now being created by minions. But at the same time, the Stripe code base is handling like over $1 trillion of payments. If we don't want these agents running loose and doing any kinds of risky changes to prod, already said there's a review process. Are there any other security measures in place so to make sure the minions don't cause havoc?
Yeah, sure. So the minions are first of all running in a sandbox developer environment, so the dev box. So they don't have access to the public internet, or they're not running directly on our production systems. They're running in a developer environment, much the same way our Stripe developers would develop in, which is, an environment of like least privileges and intended for development, not for not running on a production host. Right. Apart from that, the code changes are essentially the same as that, or have the same security measures applied to them that any regular change would be made. The idea with minions is not to change the software development lifecycle from, in total. It's to augment a part of it to allow our engineers to focus on other parts of the lifecycle rather than, focusing on having their hands on the keyboard, creating branches and small changes all the time. We can let them focus on the, as you mentioned earlier, bigger architectural changes and less so on the small parts.
Cool. Yeah, and you still have like CI running tests, and if anyone's interested in that process, there is a blog post on stripe.dev as well about how we choose the appropriate tests for each change, because we have thousands of tests as well for our ginormous code base. So cool. All right, how is our minion doing?
It's great. I can see that the minion has implemented the change, and the next thing it's going to do is open up a pull request for us. So I can see in the diff here, this is the change the agent has made, as we discussed in the plan, just literally a simple one-line change. Right. Awesome. And the agent has also gone ahead and created a pull request and pull request description for us, complete with the, it's noted that it's safe to revert this pull request, just one line, obviously not a major change, just a simple example. So yeah, when we're ready, we could go ahead and if we wanted to and hit create pull request and awesome. Start the review process of getting this merged to production in just a few minutes.
All right, awesome. So I am really looking forward to your talk tonight. It'll be an even deeper dive on how all of this works, so be sure to check the link in the description for the final talk. And it was so great talking to you today, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. You too, yeah.